I think some engineers, when they get older, they want to have the autonomy to work for a few days and kind of say, hey, I don't need to be checked on. But I think every time I've ever shown my work, even if I just explained it, then it got better.
Hello and welcome to the Being an Engineer podcast. Today we're joined by John Boezi, a product development expert and mechanical engineer with over 15 years of experience bringing innovative ideas to life. As the founder of Itri PD LLC, John specializes in designing cutting-edge products across industries like medical devices, outdoor sports, and consumer goods, all while fostering strong team cultures and solving complex engineering challenges. John, thank you so much for being a guest on the show today.
Happy to do it, Aaron. How are you doing today?
Excellent. So John and I have a little bit of history, actually. Years ago, we did some work together. John was generous enough to lend some of his time as a contract engineer for Pipeline, and I had a very positive experience working with him. He did excellent work. And from there, he kind of went off to do a few other adventures of his own. And we recently were able to reconnect. And here we are spending some time on the podcast. So excited to talk again, John, and catch up and share some value with the listeners.
Yeah, me as well. And I appreciate that opportunity when you gave it to me. I also had a great experience. And it seems like you guys are being successful now. So love to see it.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So first question, why did you decide to become an engineer?
I don't know if it was a decision so much as it's in my genes. There are a lot of engineers in my family, people who are either in construction, other trades, or in engineering. My family immigrated from Italy on my mother's side. And so a lot of people there use their hands to make a living. And we have some chemical engineers and some civil engineers and a lot of construction people. But for me personally, when I was in high school, I got recruited to be in the Science Olympiad, which was a science competition for us nerds in high school, and I gravitated towards the building construction projects like the Rubik's Cube type stuff, or make a device to soften a landing of an egg so it doesn't crack and so forth, and had a lot of fun doing those things. And we even got to go to a national competition in Colorado. It basically crystallized for me what an engineer was. I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. I'm not going to sit at a computer all day and type in a spreadsheet. Let's make some stuff. So that set me on the path to finding engineering schools and colleges. And I looked at mechanical engineering, went straight down a list and applied to all the top schools. And that's how I ended up in Georgia Tech, and I make my home in Atlanta now.
Nice. I had similar experiences in high school. I remember the egg drop in our physics class and various other builds that we were challenged with. When I got into engineering, I think one of the things I didn't appreciate was the documentation side of engineering. I love to build things and, make prototypes, work in CAD, put things together. I don't love the documentation side of things. I'm curious, as you necessarily got into that side of engineering as well, was that a surprise to you, or was it something that you were expecting?
Certainly wasn't expecting it, but and I think I probably resisted it at first, but now it's actually integral to my process. My brain really wants to categorize and bucketize things, and I feel like the documentation process really lets me do that. I learned from an older engineer at one point early to have kind of a slide deck open while I was doing work and take screenshots and put them on different slides. And I felt like that made a kind of living design history document for me. And I found that really useful in a lot of different ways. So since then, I found a lot of benefits in documenting things. And so I'm kind of on the other side of the spectrum now.
Nice. I definitely would not want to spend, 24/7 just creating drawings. However, there is something that is especially beautiful about a drawing that's really well put together, or a document that's just really clear, and you can give it to someone, and without any supplementary explanation, they can go off and do the thing, whether it's manufacture a part or complete a process. And I do find a certain degree of joy in a really well put together document.
Yeah, I had an older engineer kind of give me a red line early on, and he was like, "Hey, have you considered the visual weighting of where you have your views on this?" And I was like, it just blew my mind. Like, why would I even be considering that? But he wanted to aspire to have a beautiful drawing as well as one that was, fully dimensioned.
I love that. Yeah, there is some art in it as well. You have quite a lot of different experience. There's medical devices, consumer products, outdoor products. Do you approach the design process differently when you're working on these different areas, or is the design process kind of the same regardless of what type of product you're working on?
Yeah, I personally think that design is pretty universal. I think that anyone who is designing and building something for someone else, there's a lot of commonalities, universal truths to that. I have a friend who's a golf course designer, and I feel like we can talk about, sort of the same things. What do the golfers want? How are we going to design the course where it's going to meet them, but also meet their needs, but also be challenging? So I feel like there is a lot to that that's really, really, really universal. And for me as a consultant, I spent a lot of times having a lot of projects where I didn't know what I was going to be working on. I didn't know the technology. And so you have to learn what it is. And you find that, there's some things that are really the same all the way through. If you have a process that you follow, it can be successful for kind of all genres.
What is your process? So let's say that I'm a new customer for you. I come to you, John. I've got this idea. Here's a back of a napkin sketch, and this is what I want your help with. Where do you start, and what are some of the concrete steps that you take throughout that development process to maximize the chances of successful outcome?
Yeah, so at my last stop, I was sort of building the engineering department from the ground up, and so I made guidelines and principles for the department, but I also made a phased approach to how product development would work there. And famously, I think, or at least internally famously, phase 0 came to emerge because I started at phase 1, and then I realized it was actually this really critical step that happens at the beginning that I started calling phase 0. And that's really where you start to hit on some of the main specifications. Like, a lot of times clients will come to me and they haven't really even hashed out some really basic things that they're going to have to answer through the process and the journey. And if you can really list those out and kind of have those conversations earlier on with people, you can be way more efficient with the process. So, we would spend months sometimes talking about, an idea and whether it would work, where the product fit was, how much it would cost. So we knew how much we could spend. A lot of the basic things that you would need to eventually be in a spec document. So I like to really hash that stuff out in the first phase. And then I feel like concept generation, refinement, testing, transfer to manufacturing, all of those things are pretty generic, I think, from there on out. But, for me, what's kind of integral to my process is really spending as much time up front thinking ahead so that we really know, we can spend time on being creative and generating a lot of concepts or testing instead of, hey, we went down this rabbit hole and we actually have to back out because we realize that's a no-go and we have to start a new branch of design.
I think defining the problem is one of the most critical steps in the beginning of the development process. You already alluded to that. Are there any strategies that you've used to really robustly define what that problem is before you start trying to solve it?
I'm not sure specifically. I'm a really user-centric person, so I really try to explore who is this person? Who's this targeted for? And I think a lot of companies make the mistake of trying to be as broad as possible because they think that's going to give them the most chance of financial success. But I think you actually are more successful when you can really zone in on a specific person with specific needs. And then really think about how are they going to use the product. And if you get the chance to observe it, it's even better. And I think that really is the genesis for a lot of the specifications and where the product's going to go.
I like that idea a lot, as opposed to just thinking about a group, a user group, focusing on an individual. In fact, you hear that a lot in sales and marketing when you're trying to convey a story about how a product or a service is used. The most compelling stories are not the ones that are focused on a group. They're the ones that are focused on an individual, a person, a single person. I think there's this naturally stronger connection that we as humans feel with an individual when you can frame something within the context of a single person versus, this society or this town of people or this demographic group. So I like that idea a lot about just identifying a person to whom you can attribute these different characteristics and behaviors that you want to satisfy with your product. So you've worked on a lot of projects today. thinking back over the years, is there one or two that was particularly challenging and or satisfying that you can share with us?
Maybe not one in particular, but there's some themes across the projects that are really challenging. I think to what we were just speaking to, when you have a project or a client that doesn't have a clear vision of what they're trying to do, it can be really difficult because, especially if it's subconscious, they don't realize that they're searching for a solution. And when you have somebody who's looking for results, but really needs somebody to guide them through the search of what they need, what the solution is, whether it's a mechanical solution or really like what is the customer base need and what do we need to kind of embody with our product, that can be really challenging because you have some starts and stops and some hard conversations sometimes. And that's always difficult. It's like meeting people's expectations is always a real challenge, or can be really, really painful if you don't do it.
Let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, I bet a lot of the people listening are working at companies and maybe don't have experience doing contract work. What are some of the tough conversations that you've had to have with clients around meeting expectations or otherwise?
Yeah, I think the first conversation I have with people is almost always, how does this work? Right? Like, how do you charge? What is the timing? Like all those kind of things. And the answer is always unsatisfying because it's like, well, what do you need? And like, can we flex to meet your needs? Because ultimately this is a service-based business. I think people are often wowed at how much money it takes to bring a hard goods product to market. It's not like software. You really have to be spending money upfront with the risk of not sure if you're going to get that back. And a lot of people don't have the stomach for that, but it's nice to find and identify that customer. Just like with product people, you have to find your customer. Like with my business, I'm trying to find people who understand what product development is, understand, that there's going to be some ups and downs. We're going to have to spend some money on things that are not going to make it to market. But when you understand that, you can do some really good things. And, the people need hard goods, right? Like we're always going to be interacting with the world, and it's not going to be unless AI completely takes over and we're in the matrix, like we're going to have tools that we physically interact with.
Yeah, for sure. Prototyping is always a big deal when you're working with hard goods product development. What are some of the core prototyping tools that you use? Anything, maybe even something that's not as well known or commonly used that you can share? I mean, like 3D printing, I think is kind of the standard one, but anything beyond that you've found to be particularly helpful?
Yeah, you're right. 3D printing is ubiquitous now. There's so many different forms of it. I think some of the older ones are actually a little underrated. So like, laser cutting some stuff sometimes can be really, really effective. I think making scale models too. It's like, hey, we make a lot of stuff that's not the fidelity of the printers isn't really there. So scale it up 2 or 3 times and see like what we do a lot of mechanisms. And I think that's one where like, you can laser cut some parts out and see how some gears would maybe interact in a way that you wouldn't have, otherwise. And so I think some of that like lo-fi stuff, even making stuff out of paper and like, folder material, construction paper or whatever is always really, really helpful. When I worked at Ingenuity Works, we were co-located with an industrial design firm, and those guys would get the pink foam out and they would sculpt stuff. And I think that was also there's something also about sculpting that's a little bit different than CAD work. You're using a different part of your brain and you come to different, conclusions by doing it that way.
Have you done any sculpting yourself?
I don't really, the pink foam, when you cut it up, that stuff doesn't agree with me. So the air quality gets pretty bad pretty quickly.
Got it.
So,
okay.
Yeah, I haven't done that in a few years.
Yeah. How about scaled models? You talked about that. What medium or media do you use for scaled models?
Yeah, I'm mostly talking about 3D printing things at a bigger scale. I think that we feel like, hey, we have to print exactly what's in our head. And then, sometimes, in my past work, you're doing things that are 5 or 10 thousandths of an inch. And it's just not going to do that or it might print it, but it might break. And so, you can still get a lot of benefit out of doing something at a 1.5 or 2 times scale. I think it really helps to go from 2D to 3D and then 3D again to prototyping. Learn a lot in the perspective change.
Yeah, great strategy. All right, well, I'm going to take a short break here and share with the listeners that the Being an Engineer podcast is brought to you by Pipeline Design and Engineering, where we don't design pipelines, but we do help companies develop advanced manufacturing processes automated machines, and custom fixtures, complemented with product design and R&D services. Learn more at teampipeline.us. The podcast is also sponsored by The Wave, an online platform of free tools, education, and community for engineers. Learn more at thewave.engineer. And we're speaking with John Boezi today. So John, you've talked about being passionate about creating teams with strong cultures. In your experience, what are some of those key ingredients that go into a successful engineering team?
Yeah, I'm someone who comes from team sports background, and I feel pretty strongly that the best work is done in teams. Like as someone who has been a contractor for many years, it can be daunting to try to come up with game-changing work by yourself in your basement sometimes. And I feel like working with other people really can elevate your game. I think that first and foremost, a good team is going to have, everyone's going to have a growth mindset. They're going to want to improve. They're going to want to learn new things. They're not going to be kind of like seeking status quo all the time. I think that's how you have a high performing team, is everybody wants to keep growing and get better and look back at how they did things and implement new processes and efficiencies. I think beyond that too, you all have to have a we win together mentality so that the best idea will win. I think if people get territorial or they really want to have the validation of having their design or their feature make it into the design, I think that can be counterintuitive to making a great product that's ultimately trying to keep the user in mind. How is this best serving the user? And then another thing I think I really care a lot about is sharing work, right? So being collaborative, like every day. What'd you work on today? Like rather than, I think some engineers, when they get older, they want to have the autonomy to work for a few days and on their own and kind of say, hey, I don't need to be checked on. But I think every time I've ever shown my work, even if I just explained it, then it got better. Like I was the guy who would get up from a test, walk up to the teacher to ask a question. And before I even got there, I realized the answer to my question and I would go back and sit. And so I try to make sure that the teams that I'm on, are generous with their time and they want to, or see the value in sharing their work rather than hiding it.
Yeah. There's a saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with the team. There are times when I have struggled transitioning to a team because I feel like I can do it by myself so much faster. Do you ever struggle with that paradigm? And if so, how do you get past that and embrace the team environment?
Yeah, I think all the interns out there probably know about that, because everybody wants to have interns, but then people often don't, allocate the time to really resource the interns. And then they might be like, oh, hey, I had an intern, it wasn't worth it. You didn't give them the time to really kind of get the skills to really contribute to the team. So I think it's really a philosophy thing. You have to build it and bake it into your timelining. If you're a company that's moving 1,000 miles an hour, you probably shouldn't worry about that so much. But if you have the ability to say like, hey, like let's take on some younger people, let's be developing them. They can bring some really cool, fresh perspectives to things that can pay off in the long run. But you have to kind of create space for that stuff to happen.
Nice. One of your roles is a fractional director of engineering. Can you explain a little bit about what that means? And then what are some of the rewarding aspects of being a fractional director of engineering?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a new buzz term, like fractional people, right? You have fractional CFOs, and I think what it really speaks to is like people who have a lot of experience working with companies that are still growing, right? So maybe you're somebody who has a single product and it's been successful and you want to turn it into a company, or, you're seeing some level of success yet, but you haven't grown to the level where you can have full-time engineers, or maybe there's one, you can't have a whole staff and a team and so forth. You can have these people come in, these fractional supporters come in and guide you with their experience and say, hey, here's what I would do. Here's what I've done at a past company, and kind of really supercharge you. And maybe it's like, hey, we're doing product development for 6 months. Then we're going to go to market and we're going to be selling, and we're not going to need product development. So you're really intensive with somebody for 6 months, and then they move on to another phase of the business where they're going to kind of be focused. And I think it's really great because you get this sense of helping people. And like, there's this phase of every company that they're all going to hit this. And so, you get success in helping guide them to the next phase, and then you move on to the next company. So That's what I think of when I think of as fractional engineers, somebody who can kind of come in and augment a team for the short term, help them get to the next level, and then, go on and kind of share your expertise somewhere else.
And is that something that you particularly enjoy as opposed to like, I'm going to work at this company for 30 years, and just be there full time for the rest of my life as an engineer?
It's funny you bring that up because I recently realized that I have not been anywhere for 10 years before. I don't think it's by design. I think I thought I was going to have, three jobs in my life, and now it feels like it's going to be like 10 or 12. But I don't know. Maybe I get bored easily, and I like new challenges or whatever. But yeah, no, the variety is definitely an appealing part of it to me. To work with more people and work on different projects and problems, that's like really exciting. I think when I was with a medical company for a few years, I felt a little bit stagnant because you do the 2 or 3 months of development, and then you're spending 2 years before that product comes to market, and you start another product, and that wasn't the pace I was used to.
Yeah, I had a similar experience before I started Pipeline. I worked at engineering consultancy, and I worked on several projects there, but there was one that really lasted most of my time there. It went on for about 2.5 years, and it was a really cool project. It was a medical device, a gastroplasty device, very novel, nothing like it out in the market, lots of prototyping, R&D, CAD work, fun stuff. Nevertheless, by the end of those 2.5 years, I found myself getting kind of bored of the project. And that was one thing I realized, is that I kind of need to have new projects, new challenges coming up. Even if the work is still fun and challenging, it does tend to get stale if I'm working on the same thing for that long.
Yeah, and if you're somebody who's growth minded, like, you got to change things to grow. And I think having new opportunities, new challenges is one way to do it. I wasn't built for academia to like study one problem for 5 or 10 years and maybe never even develop anything out of it. Like that validation of my work getting done, the closure of it, and then having people, have it in their hands and seeing like, oh, this is really cool. I'm glad that this exists.
Yeah. Amen. Speaking of being growth minded, so you started your career as, hands-on engineer doing the engineering work, and you still do a lot of that. You've also grown into an engineering leader. Was that always part of the plan, or did you kind of just naturally fall into leadership?
Yeah, I think I believe in the kind of like servant leadership where it's like, I'll do this. I'll take on this extra responsibility because it needs to be done, and I care about the people that are going to be affected by it. But I definitely remember from the very beginning being frustrated. At the beginning, you're a designer, right? You're doing maybe a component or something in a team, and you have a project lead, and then you grow into being a project lead, and maybe you're doing like more sophisticated systems within a bigger system, and you're getting more impact, and that's really great. You're like, oh, I have ideas about how this should work, rather than just kind of doing what's prescribed to me. And I think you go through the evolutions of that. Maybe you're the architect. Then maybe you get to sort of set the specifications or eventually set the vision. And so I think I have been gravitating to more and more complex problems. And every time you go up, you kind of are given a new type of problem. Like I may not be in CAD for a month, but I'm really thinking about the product at a super high level. And that's still a problem solving experience that is stimulating to me.
Yeah. It's always been surprising to me how much a bootstrapped team can accomplish when they're forced to accomplish a lot with a small budget. You've worked with teams who have large budgets. You've worked with teams who have small budgets. I remember last year we did an event called PDX, and we had 8 weeks to plan this event. And I thought we did a really terrific job. It was definitely bootstrapped, but we planned everything. We had, 55, 60 people show up, and it was a great event. And I remember remarking to one of the other team members that helped me plan this event that, hey, if we were at a big company right now, I bet this would have been a committee of 4 people that spent 6 months, and we got it done in 8 weeks. And I was really proud of that. What are some tips or pieces of advice that you can give to engineers who are working in a team where there aren't a lot of resources? They're kind of bootstrapped and they have to, do a lot with a little.
Yeah, that is tough. I went on a job interview at Apple once. I think it was going to be for the Apple Watch. They wouldn't tell me what it was. But one of the things that kind of stopped me up in the interview was like, they were asking me, hey, how would you go about this, this, and this? And my answer apparently wasn't satisfactory because the answer was you send all of your designs to the machine shop and they make all of them overnight for you. And I was like, that's just not how that's not my experience. I've never had the resources to think like that. That's a big shift of thinking. I don't know. I think when you're considering startup versus like kind of a bigger company, you got to figure out what you value in your experience as an engineer. And there's like a lot of excitement and freedom that comes with being in a startup. And there's like trade-offs where you're maybe going to have to bootstrap a bunch of things. And if your project doesn't work, you're maybe going to be out of a job and so forth. And then you can go work at a bigger company where they have a ton of resources. They might even have a mentor who can guide you through stuff. And there's a lot of safety with that. And maybe like a more assured kind of slower curve, but you're going to get to where you're going. That's cool too. I think people should have to figure out what they want. I'm somebody who really thrives and enjoys being challenged and like not sure if I'm going to be able to make it happen, but then I do. And then I get that pride you were talking about was like, man, that was really, really satisfying. I worked really, really hard and I did something and I'm really proud of it. And like, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning and go to work. So, I think maybe it's almost it's a feature, not a bug that there's less resources because you have to use your creativity to find new answers.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I remember a long time ago, there was a project where we were doing some reverse engineering and the software that we were using was really expensive. It was like $20,000 for this reverse engineering software. We only had one license of it. And we realized that for this project we were doing, we really needed a second license, at least for a period of time in order to meet the deadline that we had committed to. But it didn't make sense to spend another $20,000 on another license that we'd use for, like 2 or 3 weeks and then probably not pick up again for another 6 months or a year. If that, we might never need a second license. So what we did, which, what was within the, terms of use, I'll just put that out there right now so I don't get in trouble, was, instead of spending $20,000 on another license, there was a free trial period, which was 2 weeks or something like that. It would look at your IP address or your motherboard or something, and it would know if it had been installed on a laptop. So we just bought a second laptop for $1,500 and we put the license on with the trial period and it was perfect. We got what we needed to done for $1,500 instead of $20,000. And I love coming up with, out of the box, what I like to think of as clever solutions where you get what you need, without spending a ton of money on it.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good story. I think you have to do really great work. You have to try to do really great work, right? And I think sometimes people will be like, oh, well, this is a safe solution. I know it'll work. And you have to have, I think, the courage to kind of be like, well, let's take a little gamble here and see if we can do a little bit better. And I think what I was kind of hearing in between the lines there is like a drive to kind of do something elegant and not just to have a solution, but to have an elegant solution or have one that you're like, this is clever and I'm proud of it. I think there's a level of that within us engineers where we're like, we're not just trying to get the job done, we're also trying to get it done in a way that shows how smart we are.
Definitely. Yeah, totally. Are there what do you do to stay hungry, to stay inspired, to feed your creativity? Any you like going for walks? Are there books that you read? Are there movies that you watch?
Yeah, I love movies. That's, I think, how I shut my brain down. I think I found, walking is a great place for thinking, driving, the shower, that kind of situation. I've been recently learning the piano, and I think that's another thing that can completely reset my mind. So I'm the type of person, my mind starts kicking in about 20 minutes after coffee in the morning, and I'm good for like 4 hours of, sprinting. And then I start to kind of get a little bit scattered, I think. And that's where I know that about myself. I've kind of studied that enough to know that, like, that's when I go for a walk. That's where I might play the piano or something. And then I can come back again and have the second wind in the afternoon. And I think beyond that, you got to be willing to try things you haven't done before. To your point, I would build my own website. Why ask someone else to do it if I don't try it first? That's another, I think, engineering trait. It's like, well, I'm not going to pay somebody to do this plumbing for me. I can just go to Home Depot and buy a bunch of tools because I'm okay if I mess it up. If I mess it up, I'll call the plumber, which I was going to do anyways, and it's going to be the same price. So I might as well take a shot at getting it right on my own the first time.
Yeah, I think there's something too that that desire to want to do something by yourself, and not that you're going to do it on your own forever, but at least start there, learn how to do it, and then you're so much more effective managing other people, right? If you know that it takes 5 hours to do this thing, and you're managing a team, and someone on your team is taking 20 hours to do it, you know that there's a problem, and you can step in and speak to it intelligently.
Yeah, I actually got into this sort of that way. Like first job at a school, I ended up taking, maybe not the best decision, but it was in like a factory kind of setting. And I kind of knew that's what I didn't want to do, but I had to go and experience it to know that. And I know I started searching out product development almost immediately. And there was a job opening in Atlanta, and I called, and I wasn't applying. I just wanted to know more about it. And, the guy on the phone, Brian Van Heil, spoke to me for like an hour. I was very, very appreciative of that. But he was sort of like, yeah, like you don't know how to do CAD. So, we can't hire you, but you sound like a great guy. So, maybe go learn CAD and come back to us. And I was like, that's a great idea. So got a copy of Creo, and I, taught myself from a book how to do stuff. And I just started like modeling things that were around. And I just sent him some files one day. I was like, hey, I've been working on it. What do you think? Give me some feedback. And he was like, actually, we have a huge project that we just landed. I would love to have you come down and do like a 3-month contract if you're into that. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Timing worked out great. But like, if I didn't have that, the push from him, first of all, thanks, Brian. And second of all, that like, hey, let's try to figure it out on our own attitude. I probably wouldn't have been in this.
That's a terrific story. Thank you for sharing that. I love the aspect of, this guy, Brian, sounds like he became kind of a mentor to you. He wasn't paying you to go out and learn CAD, right? You took that upon yourself, took the initiative to learn CAD, and then went back and said, all right, now I have something of value. Maybe we can work together now, right? And I think a lot of times people look at it the other way. They're, if you want me to learn something, well, pay me to learn it, and then I'll give you the value. But I think sometimes that can work, but the situations in which you really have a lot more success and fulfillment are the ones where you take the initiative, you figure it out, and then you go back and actually I think you can make more money doing it that way as well.
Yeah, and if you've ever hired somebody, that like the anxiety of am I picking the right person, right? Is this person really invested in this? Are they going to leave in a couple of years? And so for me to kind of come and say, hey, 3 months, I spent 3 months doing the thing you told me to, I'm really bought into this, probably made it a lot easier for him to be like, this guy's passionate about it. Let's take a shot on investing in him. And I think there's a lot of stories of people doing that. I would recommend it highly.
Definitely. One of the strategies, if you can call it that, for me anyway, staying creative and motivated is, it might sound funny, but it's napping. I take power naps pretty regularly. I'd say a couple times a week. I'll just lie down, kind of like you in the morning. I'm great. I can fire on all cylinders all morning. But once it starts to get, 12:30, 1 o'clock, 1:30, I start slowing down. And I found that I can just push through the whole afternoon and probably work at like, 60%, or I can take 20, 30 minutes, lie down, take a quick power nap, and then get back up and probably work at 80 or 90% for the rest of the day.
Yeah, that's great. I was going to ask you how long. So 20 to 30 minutes, you feel like you can fall asleep and kind of hit that reset button and get back up.
The best power naps for me are, I don't quite fall asleep, but I'm in this kind of limbo phase where I'm not really aware that I'm awake. But then the watch buzzes, the alarm goes off, whatever it is. And I realize I wasn't actually asleep. I was just in this kind of weird power down limbo mode. But once I can get into that state, if I can, spend 10, 15, 20 minutes there, it takes a few minutes to get into that state, but I feel so much better. Yeah. Just much more productive after that.
Yeah, there's something about the brain just turning off for a minute.
Yeah.
It does really do something chemically that's really beneficial to your day.
Absolutely. Yeah. I encourage my team to take a nap during the day. I think that's a really productive thing to do. Yeah. Not in the middle of a call. Well, let's see. One more question there, and then we'll wrap things up. What is one thing that you have done or seen to accelerate the speed of engineering?
This may not be an answer you're expecting, but I think I got some feedback about perfectionism, and that I think I spend a lot of time, especially towards the end, taking something that's probably pretty good and trying to make it perfect, because I know it's eventually going to go out in the world. It's going to have my name on it. People are going to use it. And it's not like software I can just push an update, right? Like it's going to be living out there in the world. And I think part of it comes from an anxiety of like total risk mitigation, whether it's the perfect product or the mechanism works flawlessly in all situations. And it's just never going to happen. You have to kind of accept whatever the minimum viable product is another software term, but I think it's a higher threshold than a hard good. But I think you have to know when well enough, like you shouldn't let perfection stop you from moving forward and making progress. And I think that's a hard thing for a lot of engineers to embrace.
I agree 100%. I know that I get frustrated sometimes with engineers who want to make it perfect, and you can spend whatever it is, 20 hours making something really, truly good enough, or you can spend 100 hours making it perfect. And 99 times out of 100, it is not worth spending that extra 80% to get to perfection.
Yeah, and it's nice to have other people that you trust that are not on the project to kind of look at that and get their feedback on it, and when something's ready. They sort of say it's ready.
Yeah. Well, John, thank you so much for joining me today. Super fun conversation and great to catch up with you again. Anything that we haven't talked about yet that you want to bring up before we end?
No, I just hope people are out there making great products. Don't put all the smartest people in software. We need you in mechanical engineering as well. And, we all have to use these things. So, it'd be great if we here in America kept making great products. So, you could, if anybody wants to reach out, I have a website, johnboezi.com. It's got some portfolio work as well as how you can kind of get in touch with me. I'm also on LinkedIn. People can reach out and engage with me there. But yeah, I'm just hoping to continue to make great products, have fun working with good people, and take on some great challenges here in 2025.
Terrific. And I'll put links to your LinkedIn portfolio or your LinkedIn profile and your website in the show notes so folks can access them there. All right. Well, thank you so much again, John.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I appreciate the opportunity. I love that you have this podcast. We need more engineering content out there. That's good stuff.
I'm Aaron Moncur, founder of Pipeline Design and Engineering. If you liked what you heard today, please share the episode. To learn how your team can leverage our team's expertise developing advanced manufacturing processes, automated machines, and custom fixtures, complemented with product design and R&D services, visit us at teampipeline.us. To join a vibrant community of engineers online, visit thewave.engineer. Thank you for listening.